Iron sight extravaganza. Iron sights on handguns. And a bunch of different aspects of that. So, if that's your bread and butter, you're an iron sight handgun kind of guy, this might be a good episode for you. With that, welcome to the podcast where we tackle this topic and, God willing, many more the right way with God Almighty at the center, biblical, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. On that, first and foremost, I'm a Christian. Military, law enforcement, private security, contracting, competition shooting, and many other things. Bio bullet points in the show notes. Been blessed to be a professional gunfighter most of my adult life, and I am here by God's grace to tell you about it. Blessed be the Lord my rock, who trains my hands for war and fingers for battle. With that, iron sights on handguns. Do you like antique stuff? Do you like grandfather clocks and lever action rifles and dinosaurs, sextants, old school, I don't know, armoires and the pyramids of ancient Egypt and many other old things, right? Does that just get you going? Well, if so, you're probably still rocking iron sights on your handgun in 2026. I'm only halfway kidding about that, right? Iron sights, they are antiquated. They are not obsolete. That's kind of my view on it, right? They are antiquated. They are slower. They are less than an optic, a red dot, as they're colloquially called, even if they're not red or a dot. They're still generally called a red dot. Yeah, they are slower. And I was myself slow to this party. So just to give you an idea, I shot iron sights for, 35 years. I don't know how many competitions in iron sights. I still have much more competition wins in iron sights than I do with an optic. With many platforms, but handgun included, right? But years and years ago, the red dots came out, and I was like, oh, they're a fad. They'll never catch on. And they didn't go away, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this out. And I had a certain standard of, I forget, it was like headshots at 25 yards, and a certain number in a row and a certain number of time. And I had done that for years with iron sights. And I was, again, competition winner, state pistol champion. I knew what I was doing with a handgun. And I trained not even a large amount, but a decent amount with a red dot, and I shot that same drill, and it wasn't a little bit faster. It was like several times faster. I was like, oh, well, this is better. I guess I'm running a red dot now because I don't want to die, right? I'm a professional gunfighter. Anything that will help me not die is kind of a good thing. And one of the guys, when I was skeptical about it, I took a very good tactical training class, combat handgun style class, and the guy was running the dot, and this was fairly early on in the dot scene, and he said, I asked him, I was like, oh, you're running an optic, and he was like a legit operator guy. And I was like, you're running an optic on your handgun? This is before I had adopted it. I was like, what if it breaks? And he's like, iron sights break. Light bulb moment, right? Yeah, they absolutely do. I've seen them break. I've broke them. Iron sights absolutely do break. So you get a good quality optic, they're no more likely to break than iron sights. So they are better. That said, I did a poll on Patreon. Do a lot of polls on Patreon. If you're interested, there should be a link in the show notes. But the vast majority of you guys that are carrying handguns, presumably for defensive use or fighting use, are rocking iron sights. So I should do more talking about iron sights. Again, I have a lot of experience with iron sights. I still shoot with iron sights. I'm currently a private security contractor, and my current contract does not stipulate that I can use an optic. So I'm relegated to the dinosaur days, and I'm still shooting, and I do quite a bit of practicing with iron sights because bureaucracy, right? So that said, I shoot both. I still shoot both. Last year when I got back into Steel Challenge shooting, I shot it with iron sights. I started off with iron sights this season because I wanted to brush up my iron sights. So I'm very familiar with iron sights. That said, let's get into the nitty-gritty, right? Let's talk about iron sights. Okay, for iron sights, what's one of the big reasons they are slower than a dot? Well, there are a couple of reasons, but one is you have to line them up. That takes time, right? Iron, the dot, as long as you see the dot on the target, it's good to go. The iron sights you have to line up. Equal height, equal light, where you have to line up the iron sights to varying degrees of precision at varying distances. And you have to shift your focus. The human eye, if you didn't know this, can only focus on one plane of existence at a time, one depth at a time. If you don't believe me, put your finger in front of your face and look at something on the far side of the room or outside and try and focus on both at the same time. It's impossible. You can only focus on one or the other. So the things you see when you hold up the gun are generally the front sight, the rear sight, and the target. Which one of those do you focus on? You focus on the front sight, right? Because that has the most impact on where your round is going to go. If you consider, the gun is just a line, the gun is just a ruler or a line, if you move your hand, what moves the most? The front sight, because it's farthest away from your body. You focus on the front sight, it has the most impact on where your bullet's going to go in relationship to the sights. There are techniques for focusing on the target and shooting iron sights. I'm very aware of that, but unless you're advanced, I'm not going to get into that. This is not the episode for that. But you focus on the front sight, and it takes time to shift your focus. You're shooting this target, and you have to find the target and then focus on the front sight, and then find the next target and focus on the front sight. So it takes time. But that's where your focus should be, on the front sight. I know that's very basic, but I thought I would put it in here since I'm talking about iron sights, and nobody popped out of their mom's womb winning steel challenge competitions with iron sights. You had to learn it along the way. So somebody out there is still learning. So let's not forget that. For your basic iron sights, there are two major categories of holds. One I'm going to call your classic target style hold, the 6 o'clock hold. This means that you hold your iron sights below the bullseye of your target. This is classic bullseye shooting competition like 101 sight picture. So if you picture like your front sight, you make the bullseye like a lollipop. You float it on the top of that sight. So your bullet will impact above the front sight, assuming you're not flinching, right? So this is a classic bullseye target shooting sight picture for iron sights. And why is this? Because you can see the target and you can get very precise. If you're trying to shoot a small target with iron sights, you kind of need this, because if you move the front sight on there, the front sight may be so large you can no longer see the target. So you're trying to guess where the center of the sight is and where that bullet's going to impact. And ironically enough, the Glocks use this, right? The Glocks use a 6 o'clock hold or a target hold. You're shooting above the front sight. Because I think when the Glocks came out in the ancient of days in the 80s, right, when I came to be, right, so that was still really common. The common pistol common pistol things were like more bullseye shooting. And I think they just picked that because it was what was common at the time, and Glock is not known for innovation, right? So Glocks tend to have a 6 o'clock hold. Now I prefer, and I think is more intuitive for fighting, is a combat hold. And this means you put the center of the dot of the front sight. Most front sights, unless you're just talking about black sights, most front sights are going to have a dot, whether it's a white dot or a fiber optic or a tritium vial. We'll get into those different things later, God willing. But most of those will have some kind of dot in the center of the sight. I like a combat hold, meaning wherever that dot is, that's where that bullet's going to go. Put dot, slow or fast, steady, smooth depression of the trigger till the shot breaks, and I want that bullet to go where the dot is. Dot on thing I want to kill or shoot or defend myself against, depending on the application, hunting, defense, whatever, right? Put dot on target, apply appropriate trigger maneuvering, and get that shot to break cleanly. And then repeat until the threat is no longer there or the food is in my belly. You get the idea. But that's a combat hold. Bullet goes where the dot is. You may prefer one or the other. I prefer the combat hold even when I'm doing pretty far distance stuff, because that's what I'm accustomed to. I don't want to be thinking about, when I draw my gun, where am I aiming? I want to aim where the bullet goes. And I think this is the most logical thing to do when you're talking about defensive fighting style shooting. It's just the most intuitive to me to put the dot where I want the bullet to go. All right, so that said, there are two major schools there: 6 o'clock hold or target hold, or a dead-on hold or combat hold. Those are the two big categories. So hopefully that makes sense. And obviously, this is less until you get fairly advanced in pistol shooting. You're probably not going to realize this as much, but just like a rifle, your handgun with iron sights is going to have 2 zeros. Well, the optic too, but we're talking about iron sights. It's going to have 2 zeros. It will have a close 0 and a far 0. On something like an AR, right, you may be talking about like a 5250 0. That's my preferred 0. You may be talking about a 25-300 0. So you have, let me do this in long form audio the best I can. When you look at your sights, you look over your front and rear sight, you're looking at a straight line to infinity. I know that light is theoretically affected by gravity, right? But let's leave Einstein out of this. For all practical purposes, for ballistic ranges, light is not bent by gravity. It's a straight line. Bullets are very much affected. They very much want to go and return to the earth from whence they came, right? So you never fire, like the bullet never goes in the same plane as the sights. It needs to arch up and cross those iron sights. If it didn't do that, they would never shoot in the same place. Your bullet would only ever fire under your gun and then keep dropping from there. So you need to angle the barrel up ever so slightly so that it crosses your line of sight. It will cross once in the beginning and once at the end. Generally with a handgun, I like mine set up for like a 7-yard and a 50-yard 0. So I hit exactly where I'm aiming at 7 yards and exactly where I'm aiming again at 50 yards. So I like to do a lot of my accuracy training at 50 yards. So it just makes the most sense. But yours may vary, but just realize that you're not always going to shoot where your iron sights are aimed at. It may be slight, and if you're the guy that struggles to shoot a silhouette at 25 yards, you're talking about a difference of centimeters, right? But if you're trying to do a headshot at 50 yards, it absolutely will make a difference. So realize that you're not just going to shoot where your iron sights are. Even if you have it zeroed at a certain distance, you're not always going to shoot at that same place. Even in the handgun ranges where you're not even worried about ballistic drop so much. Obviously, if you get out to 100, 200, 300 yards with a handgun, which you absolutely can do, right? Silhouette shooting has been around for a long time. You absolutely can shoot longer range with a handgun when you practice with it. Even before that range, you're not always going to shoot where your iron sights are. Okay, now let's talk about different kinds of sights. You have your just straight black target sights. I only really like these when I'm doing really precise, longer range handgun shooting. But in general, I like a really bright front sight and a completely black rear sight. This is what I like. You can like something else, but you're probably wrong. And here's why. When you start shooting fast, again, where should you be focusing at? Your front sight. And when you start shooting really fast, I'm talking like several rounds a second, your eye is going to be, straining to pick up where it should be focused. And you don't want it confused. I know when you're just shooting static at an indoor range at a giant silhouette at 7 yards and you're taking all your time in the world, you can line up those 3-dot sights. But when you're going fast and taking chances and you're seeing dots all over the place, you don't want to be guessing as to which dot you should be focused on, right? So I only want one bright thing at which my eye wants to focus, and that's the front sight. That's me. That said, kind of 3 white dot sights are the standard. They shouldn't be. If you have 3 dot sights, my advice is just take a Sharpie and black out the rear sight so you have a bright dot in the front and a black rear. That's mine. I also prefer a U-notch in the back, also kind of for speed shooting. Just my preferred preference. If you have a square notch in the back, don't worry about it. Don't think you have to get new sights. But that's my preferred. Bright front, U-notch in the back, but a bright front sight. And you can achieve that many different ways. But that's what I like. Now let's talk about some of the different kinds. One way to get a bright front sight is just paint, right? It's just brightly colored, like literally color, like paint. That's an easy way to do it. And another way, a little bit more advanced, right, is fiber optic. So a fiber optic is just a light gathering pipe, basically, that gathers the light and puts it out at either end, the front and the rear. So you can put that in your front sight. You'll see a lot of sights that come like this. These are great. They work great in normal lighting conditions. They're very bright. They're like super bright if you're mostly going to be doing target or competition shooting. They're fantastic. They're fairly easy to replace if you get the kind where you can just buy the If you shoot a lot, you're just going to buy that, fiber optic piping in like a foot-long section or several inch-long section. You just cut it off and trim it because it's going to get, busted up and ragged if you shoot a ton. So they're cheap, they're easy to maintain, they're very bright, so they're good for that. The fiber optic front sights, a way to get even brighter front sight. It's really hard to get confused at that when you're looking at a giant glowing ball in front of your gun. The other way is tritium for night sights. Now, if you have good form, you only really need a tritium vial in the front, but you may want vials in the back. Again, I don't like the 3-dot. If you're going to do the traditional 3 dots, I would, again, take a Sharpie and then go in the dark, and then I would color them in with a Sharpie and then slowly wipe it off until the ones in the back are about half as bright as the ones in the front. This is what I do. I'm not saying you have to do this, but it's a lot better in my opinion, because you start doing crazy stuff and like you're laying on your back shooting sideways or been prone, and you're at some weird angle, and those dots could be lined up, but they're lined up and the front sight is all the way on the left or the right of your rear sight. And you may think that's not going to happen if you're shooting, again, at an indoor range with the lights off super slow. But, if you're laying on the ground trying to shoot under a car, absolutely you can do that if you're trying to do it in a hurry. So, I would advise you just take a Sharpie and make the rear sight. So they still glow, but they glow about half as bright as the front sight. Another way to do this is the figure 8 style sight. So you have a big, bright tritium vial on top, and then at the bottom of your U-notch, you have a smaller tritium vial, and you just line them up like a figure 8, like upside down. So the bigger one's on top. But this is another easy way to do tritium night sights, if you even think you want tritium night sights. One thing I think misconception is about the night sights, I actually don't think they're super necessary. I have them on my duty gun. I actually don't think they do very much, and here's why. If it's normal lighting, you don't need them. If it's completely black, you can't use them because you have to see the target, right? If everything's completely black, it doesn't matter if you line up your sights because you don't know what you're shooting at. If you illuminate your target with your flashlight, with your white light, guess what? Now you can see the silhouette of your sights. You actually don't need night sights. The only time that night sights are actually an advantage is if you're in the dark, you're not illuminating your target, you don't have white light, you just happen to be like in the dark and your target is standing in front of a street light and he's illuminated. And it's not quite enough light, because even then, generally, you can see the outline of your sight, so you don't need night sights. I think they're mostly marketing. But there are certain lighting conditions, very few and far between, a lot less than marketing would have you believe, where maybe you don't have quite enough light to see the outline of your sights, but you can still see the threat of the target, but you still want to line up your sights at night. Then they can kind of be an advantage. But most of the time, not super important, so don't think that you need them. Actually go out and shoot in different lighting conditions and actually realize that, that you actually probably don't use them very much. But that's me. If you want night sights, I got night sights on my duty gun because it came with them. There's nothing wrong inherently with the night sights. There's also the best of kind of all of that is the I think it's True Glow that makes them. There may be other companies that make them, but I've run these for going back a long time. And those are the tritium fiber optics. So they'll glow day or night. In the day, much like an ACOG, Advanced Combat Optical Gun Sight on an AR, they're dual illuminated. So you have the tritium that lights up the fiber optic pipe during the day, just the ambient light will light it, but at night when there's no light, it will also light it up. So you have bright sight all the time. They're kind of nice. Again, I don't think the night thing is necessary, but if you want kind of the best illuminated front sight all the time, get that. And I would say just get it with the black rear, but that's me. You do you. There are a lot of different kinds. There's also some different styles of iron sights. There's actually like ghost ring iron sights on a handgun. I don't like those because when you fire and the front sight, if you keep your eyes open, you'll see that front sight jump through that hoop, and it's kind of hard to keep track of because you're losing track of it because your rear sight obscures it. I tried those for a while, not my favorite. But what I do like are there's some diamond style sights. So instead of the front sight being flat on the top, it's like a diamond. I really like those. Or the trapezoidal like pyramid style sights. Those can be really good because you can get a really big front sight for when you're shooting fast and close, but you can get a really precise aiming point where you use the very top pointed end of the front sight if you're shooting far. and slowly for precision. So those are really good. They're not very common, but they are some of my favorites. So if you're going to shoot iron sights, you might look for some of those if you want to do both. If you want to shoot really precise up close, or you want to shoot really fast up close, but you want to shoot really precise at distance, or you want to shoot really precise up close like a hostage shot, and you're like really wanting to thread the needle, so not like a whole head, but you're shooting like a quarter of a head. Kind of nice, assuming you know where your gun shoots in relation to your iron sights. But those are less common, but still very good sights, and they're worth mentioning. Some other things that you may want to consider on the iron sights. Do they snag on stuff? You might think, I don't want my iron sights to snag on stuff. We actually might. If you get shot in the hand and you can only have one hand to rack your gun, there's a pretty standard technique where you grab your gun and you use the rear sight to rack your slide to clear a malfunction or to reload your gun or whatever, right? So you actually may want your rear sight to snag. You might want it to snag on the side of your holster. You should practice this to make sure you can snag it on the side of your holster and re-rack the slide if you're doing like a tap rack bang with one hand. Or you could do it on your belt buckle, assuming you're running a belt buckle, right? If you're wiener carrying with some little teeny belt, probably not. But if you're carrying like a man with a gun belt and a gun on your hip, you absolutely can do either one of those. So I probably wouldn't advise that if you're wiener carrying, appendix carrying, right? I probably wouldn't recommend you rack it on your, that's probably a bad idea. But if you're carrying like a man, a full-size fighting handgun on your hip, then there's absolutely techniques to, clear malfunctions with one hand with your rear sight. That said, you may decide you don't care about that. Novak sights are very slick and don't get caught on a lot. They're mostly made for competition shooting. They're very good rear style sights. That's also a cut, like a dovetail cut, so don't get those confused. But do you want your sights to snag? There's also the higher sights, suppressor height, or co-witness iron or co-witness optical sights. So like I like to co-witness my optic. If I'm doing an optic on a handgun, I don't just want the dot. I want the dot and the iron sights, so I can slave the dot to the irons. And when that sight ever breaks, I can still use the irons. Or if my iron sights get knocked off, I can tell that something's out of whack. It's not plumb. It's not true. So there's the higher sights, which you may want for a suppressor, which I think is kind of pointless on a handgun. But hey, but if you're running a dot, you can also use that to co-witness and slave your dot to your irons. So you might want higher sights for that. What else? What else am I forgetting on iron sights? On a handgun. Oh, let's talk about modifying iron sights real quick. You might want, if you're into guns at all, you might want a small set of files anyway. I actually keep one in my range bag. But you can use these to like hog out your square notch in the rear to a U-notch, like a regular old chainsaw file. You can usually do that depending on the sight, right? There's that. And one real easy way, we talked about having a bright front sight. If you want the cheap, easy way to have a bright front sight, it's just paint, right? They actually make like paint markers. They also make like specifically engineered sight paint markers. I've seen those. I think Birchwood Casey makes them. But just the paint markers if you get the right color. My advice is hit it with white. Whatever color you're going to make it, hit it with white first, and then hit it with the bright color. So, hit it with white and then chartreuse, or white and then bright orange. So you can do that to have a really bright front sight. Even if you have a tritium vial, you might want to make the whole sight really bright, and then you might want to, find a way to clean that paint off that glass so that you can still see the tritium at night if you want to do that. But yes, nail polish is another real easy, affordable one. Go find the Dollar Tree, bright, obnoxious, chartreuse, lime green, whatever color you want, nail polish, and then get a white one, of like a matte white one if you can find it, and hit them with the white and then hit them with the obnoxious color. So that's a cheap, easy way to get a bright front sight. Dawson Precision, they're a company been around a long time. I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but if you realize that you're actually not flinching and you're shooting where you're aiming, and your load that you want to carry, your duty load or whatever, is not shooting point of aim, point of impact with your iron sights, you do all the calculations, you go to Dawson Precision, they make really good sights. But also, whether you buy their sights or not, they have a free iron sight calculator. And what I mean by that is you put in your data, like I'm shooting at 25 yards and I'm aimed and I'm shooting, 3 inches above point of aim, point of impact. And I have this, you'll need a micrometer. I have this height iron front sight. So they'll say, okay, if you want to shoot and change your point of impact this much at 25 yards, you need this much higher, it would be higher in my scenario, iron sight, and that will get you to shoot point of aim, point of impact. So you can actually adjust on there depending on where you want to shoot with your iron sights. So that Dawson Precision Ballistic Calculator, that's a good free resource there. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. It's just a good resource. I actually don't take sponsors on the show. Why? Because I want to be honest. I don't want to be pushing you, the latest and greatest camo or you got to have this chest rig, man, or you're going to die. That's not me. I take money from you guys, Patreon, to hopefully give you honest, good content without a bunch of sponsors. I hope you appreciate that. There are commercials that the host puts those on there, the people that host the podcast. I don't have any say in what those are. I don't even know what they are because they're tailored to your algorithm and your location. So I don't even know what you're hearing. But trust me, I have no idea what you're hearing for the commercials. But I don't take sponsors. I try and keep it honest. You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes and twists the words of the righteous. Anyway, so what else on that? I don't want that to be the tactical verse of the day. For your tactical verse of the day, if a man is caught breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no guilt for his bloodshed. It's a good verse. With that, thanks for listening and have a blessed day.